been reading and thinking about change, how we make changes in our life. And this applies to my work and my home life. I think you too have been thinking about change because we're taking this class together about changing the way that we speak. And when you think about change, there's two types of change that can happen in one's life. A reaction to a catastrophe or crisis like the financial collapse of 2008 or when someone gets cancer. The type of change I'm going to be talking about is proactive change, where you're going to do something positive to get better. But those changes are hard. We're resistant to making change. And so that's what I'm going to talk about here. And to do that, I'm going to talk about a model, a metaphor that comes from a University of Virginia professor, Jonathan Haidt. And it's also captured in this book, Switch, by the Heath brothers. This model is about an elephant. I want you to imagine an elephant walking down a path with a rider on his back. And I'm going to start by talking about the rider because that's one of the most obvious places and spend less time on the rider. So and then talk about all three elements. The rider is the logical part of change, us knowing that we need to make a change intellectually. And I'm going to use an example throughout my little talk here of a change I made 3 years ago where I lost some weight. It was a good thing. And I had a logical reason to do it because I'd be healthier and live longer. So I had pretty good motivation. Now, there is a problem with the rider who can tend to get bogged down in analysis, like in my case of learning about insulin resistance and how it affected my food cravings. And a way to help the rider past that analysis paralysis is to give them a plan. Riders like plan, and in that case it was for me to follow a specific diet. So I'm going to move on now to the other two elements that are a little more complicated to work with, and that's the elephant. Now the elephant, next up is the elephant. The elephant is the emotional side, and so that's how we really can get change done, is when we are bought into it emotionally. But the flip side of that is elephants don't like to make change, and so you want to appeal to the emotional side. And in the case of my diet, it was very appealing for me to be more slender. My clothes fit better. I looked better. That was emotionally good for me. Part of the reason the elephants don't want to make change is because they're afraid of failure. So let's look at this for a moment. When we try something new in our lives, like video games or speaking French, we're not good at it. We're terrible at it. Yet we have a fear of failure, and it's very important for us to understand that and expect it. So I want to talk about research that Stanford did some years back, where they explained to a group of kids that they could change and get better and grow. And they went into a junior high school in a very poor area, poor neighborhood, and talked to this group of kids, and they had them for 2 hours. And one of the groups, they broke them into two groups. And the first group, it gave them some general study habits about how to do better in school. And the second group, they talked to them all together differently. They talked to them about what I'm saying here is that you can change and grow. And the brain is like a muscle. And that when you first try something, you're not good at it. And they said to the kids, when you do video games for the first time, or when you do Guitar Hero or skateboard, are you any good at it? No, you have to keep practicing and get better, and that your brain is like that. And it worked wonders. The kids loved hearing this. One kid said, "You mean I don't have to be dumb anymore?" It helped change their image of realizing that they could grow and get better and make mistakes along the way. The way the researchers measured this is at the end of the year, they went back and they talked to the teachers. Now, the teachers hadn't understood exactly what had happened in that 2-hour session with the different groups. They asked the teachers at the end of the year to assess what kids have made the most change, have grown, have improved the most through the year. And 76% of the kids that the teachers identified were the kids in the group that had learned about change. Now, this is important at our work. I'm a manager at my work, and I know too often, at least here in America, we don't expect failure. We don't allow failure. We really set up an environment where you just plan and you execute and you measure your results. And then you might try again and plan, execute, and measure. But we don't like failure. We don't allow for it. There's no time for learning or practice. So if we set this up better and really treat ourselves and our employees not so much like a scorekeeper, but more like a coach, and explain, look, we're going to have troubles, we're going to struggle and make mistakes and get knocked down, but we'll get better, we'll succeed. Then we'll indeed be able to make the changes we need to make. The last piece of the model is the environment. And to think of this, think of like a drug addict who's trying to who's making a change and getting off of drugs. You want them in an environment where there aren't drugs around. From my case with my diet, I needed to have in my house where I didn't have cookies and potato chips around. Another piece of the environment, though, that was also very useful is I changed the size of plate that I ate on. This is another example of environment. I still to this day, I eat on a smaller plate, and therefore portions look plenty big to me on my little plate. It's a easy kind of way to make a change, to structure your life that way. And the best way that we can make change easily is by changing our habits. And habits are our behavioral autopilot. And if we can set up regular habits, like after I drop my daughter off at school, I'm going to go to the gym, then that's a kind of a regular daily habit to institute. And the way to institute this is with action triggers. So I learned about this study that New York University professor Goldwitzer performed, where he had some kids that in his class, and he gave them an extra credit assignment during Christmas time, an essay to write about their experience on Christmas Eve. And he said that this assignment was due on December 26th, just 2 days later. He had 2 classes. The first class, he gave this assignment. You can get extra credit if you write an essay on your events of how you spent Christmas Eve. Get it to me by December 26th. The second group got that same assignment, and they got an action trigger. While they were there in the class, he said, I want you to think when you're going to write this essay and where you're going to be to do it. Make a plan. And so those kids went off. The first group, 33% of them turned in their essay. The second group, 75% of them turned in their essay. So if you preload a decision, like after I go to class, I'm going to go for a run, and connect it in your mind, you're much more likely to build a habit and make a change. And so with those, if you think about those college kids, the kids who went home for Christmas and didn't have an action trigger, they were thinking they were going to write their essay, but then Christmas happens and you've got relatives dropping in and presents and new games and all kinds of distractions. And they didn't have in their mind exactly how they were going to succeed at what they were doing. So I want to wrap up and summarize, if I haven't made it clear enough, that you need all 3 elements here of this metaphor to make a change. And in the case of my diet, my losing weight, I had a specific problem I noticed. I'm frugal by nature, I like to save money. And whenever there was free food around, I liked to partake of it. And this is especially a problem because a lot of times free food is kind of junk food, like what you have at parties, is certainly not good for a diet. So I had to work on all 3 elements. And for the rider, for the logical side, I had to have a little talk with the rider and say, no, really, are you going to eat all the free food that you come across in your life? You're going to get pretty fat. To the elephant, I said, that food could taste great, but it won't taste as great as how it feels right now to have your clothes fit well and that you look good. And then I set some action triggers. I pre-made some decisions for myself when I would realize, this is one of those meetings about once every 4 or 6 weeks. I'll go to a morning meeting where there's donuts and pastries out. And I would tell myself, okay, you're going to ignore those donuts and pastries. You don't need those. I wish you could change. I wish change for all of us in improving the way that we speak.